Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us tonight, and thank you for being patient while we moved our panelists over from the screening to this panel discussion. Before I introduce our special guest, I'd like to remind you that you can type your questions or comments into the chat box found at the right of the screen, and we'll do our best to answer them as they come up. I'd like to introduce our guests that we have here tonight. Don Dempsey from Survivors Rescue, the horse rescuer, and also Frank Eld. He's a preservationist, longtime preservationist based in the Boise area. Thank you both for being with us tonight. Don, I want to start with you. Tell me, how did Survivors Rescue come about? When did it happen? And how do you sustain yourself?
We started Survivors Rescue in 2012. I had seen a starving horse in a kill pen on Mother's Day and decided I needed to rescue him. We rescued him, and his name is Survivor. He is the mascot of the rescue, and it all started from there. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, so we're funded solely on donations, and we are entering our 9th year here in November, and we'll keep going from there.
At what point did you, in your life, did you decide that this is something that you wanted to commit yourself to?
Forrest, I have been carting animals home since I was a little girl, and it's just always been a love of mine. I love animals, and I have a heart for it. And at a certain point, I just realized that it was my calling in life, and I am blessed to be able to do what I do. And I try to save as many as I can.
And when I contacted you, I drove by when I was up in Sandpoint, and I drove by and I saw your farm. And then when we met, you told me about Bailey, and it was really, really quite interesting. How did that all come about? When did you meet her, and how did she come to volunteer at Survivors?
Well, Bailey is the daughter of a friend of my husband's, a co-worker. He works for the power company, and my husband's a builder. And he had said that his daughter would like to volunteer. And so she showed up and started volunteering. And at about 2 weeks in, she brought me a paper to sign. It was for community service, which I wasn't aware of. But Bailey is amazing. Not only did she get a 4.0, but she now has a bachelor degree in behavioral
behavioral science, maybe? Or,
yeah.
Yeah.
And, she's just done so well for herself. And not only did Survivors change her life, she changed our life as well. She's just so much support and always the first one to volunteer. And we love Bailey. We couldn't do what we do without her.
So before I move to Frank, our preservationist, I want to remind or tell our viewers that please feel free to participate in the chat box. Tell us what you like about barns, any particular barn story you have or a question that you might have. We'd be happy to try to answer that as we go along. Frank, yes. Tell me, the Barn Whisperer, how did that come about? How long have you been preserving old buildings, and why did you decide that that was something that you wanted to commit your life to?
Well, it goes way back to when I was in high school, and I got involved. First of all, I restored an old pump organ that belonged to my Uncle Victor, and it was on our farm. It was in storage, And my mother told me the story about this would have been her older brother who was given that organ as part payment for working on a farm up in Long Valley. And then Victor was called to World War I and he was killed in the war. And eventually the organ came to our farm. And when Mom told me the story, I said, well, can we fix it? Can we preserve it? And she said, yes. And we moved it into the house, which was the only warm place on the farm. And she worked on the mouse-eaten bellows and I worked on the wood part. And that really sparked in me an interest both in heritage and in old things, old artifacts. And then in the 60s, when I was in high school, I helped establish a temporary museum in Donley for the Idaho Territorial Centennial. And that sparked with me the interest we needed a museum in Valley County, in Long Valley. And
Is that Roseberry?
well, and it eventually became Roseberry. Yes. And the other person that was involved with that museum, we stood there on the steps and we said, we'd like to see a vision of a museum in Long Valley. And where would it be? And we said, Roseberry. That's the best place. And so when I graduated college, I was going to college then, or starting, I bought the Roseberry store. And as they say, the rest is history. Now there's 25 buildings in the Roseberry complex. And it's been over 50 years ago. And I've been saving buildings since then. And I have a saying. People ask me why I'm so adamant about preserving buildings. And my answer always is, we can read a lot about history, we can see movies and whatever. But if you want to feel history, you got to be in an original old building. And so I'm just trying to preserve the feeling of history.
Well, I see we have a question from Mary. She's asking, how did you decide which barns to use in the video? She's seen a lot of wonderful barns in Idaho. And it really came down to, I had a certain number of barns that I researched and I decided that I wanted to use those barns in the show, the wedding barn, the Schick barns out in the Buell area. And then some of it was just driving down the road. And that's how I met Don. And that's also how I met Kevin Harville, the guy who lives out in Potlatch. I was just driving after I'd done the shoot with the calving barns in Moscow, and I just decided to drive out into the Palouse and came around this corner, and there's the incredible barn, and I went up and talked to Kevin, and we got a great story out of it. So some of it is just kind of luck, and some of it was research. And a question for Don. Are the horses in their forever home, or can you adopt those horses?
Well, ideally, we rehab them after we rescue them, and then they are put up for adoption into ideal homes. We do have some sanctuary members that reside at the rescue for one reason or another. So ideally, like I said, we would like to adopt as many as we can. Once we're full, we're full. So it's important to keep them moving and into homes. Finding ideal homes is not an easy task, though. So we have to research the homes that they're going into and make sure that it's going to be a long-term, lifetime home for them. We don't want to have to rescue them again, and we don't want the horse to have to go through that again. So ideally, we would like to see them adopted.
Now, when we were talking off camera, you were saying that you've got a horse coming in from Alaska. Tell me about that and what the horse's issue is and what you're going to do to hopefully make things better.
Yeah, we have a rescue coming in this week. As I said, A veterinary friend of mine who used to live here in Sandpoint moved up there and opened a hospital, veterinary hospital in Alaska. And she had a client. This horse used to be down in southern Arizona. It was sold through a sale. It's an amazing horse. They paid a lot of money for it, shipped it to Alaska. And when it got there, the care wasn't the best. It ended up with a degenerative disease. It was put out in the cold on a hillside in Alaska. When it was diagnosed with this, the owner didn't want to deal with the issues. It's a time consuming. It's a degenerative disease that has no known cause and has no known cure. So it's quite the commitment to care for it. So this vet actually purchased the horse from the gal because she was just going to sell it to a dealer, which we know would put it in the slaughter pipeline and put it at risk. And it had captured her heart. So she purchased the horse from the gal and contacted us and asked us if we would take it in. And so it'll be arriving this week. It's coming off a 7,000-mile journey since the day that it sold. And it has some issues. Right now, they're currently managed, but as I said, there is no cure. But we are proven to produce miracles here at Survivors Rescue, and we are going to figure it out, and we're going to work hard, and we're going to save this horse.
Great. Looks like another question. This was a preview, right? Says, so the showing on 10/15, which is Thursday, will it be longer? Well, no, the show on this coming Thursday, and then we'll also air on Sunday, is the show that you have seen tonight. But I am working on a show that will be an hour long that will air during our March pledge drive. So we'd love to have you view that one too. I mean, there's a lot of things that I filmed that unfortunately got put on the cutting room floor, and but they'll be in the longer hour-long show. So I got a question from Bruce. There is a round barn scene in the show. What do you know about it? Well, I found this round barn. It's up around St. Mary's near Lake Coeur d'Alene, and I found it during my research, and so I went up there and drove by it. And from my understanding, I do have the number of the gentleman that owns the barn, and I may try to contact him to be in the hour-long show. Apparently that barn was built, I think, in the 80s, and it's really never been used as a real barn. It's been used for storage. There's a boat in there, there's some old cars in there and things like that, but I didn't get his permission to actually go inside and film in there, so I'm going to see if I can circle back around to him on that. So it's a pretty interesting barn though. Frank, what do you think it is about barns that people are just enamored with? This particular show for Outdoor Idaho, I've only been with the show a couple of years, but I think this show has probably garnered more interest than maybe any show in the history of Outdoor Idaho. Maybe my boss Bruce would say differently, but what is it about barns that people are just in love with?
Well, it's hard to say really what it is, but I can say it's there. People love barns, and that's why we now use, that's our motto for the Idaho Barn Registry, is everyone loves a barn. And I found that out when we restored the barn in Roseberry, an old finished barn that we took apart, moved, repaired, and put up. And when I was working on that barn, and of course, I work with volunteers. All my projects are all volunteer projects. I don't get paid for it. Nobody gets paid for it. It's because we love barns. And that summer, we did that barn we started in May, we took it apart. And in the end of September, it was done. And I can say that every day, with probably less than a handful, I always had someone there who worked with me because they liked working on a barn. They loved barns. And that barn is a community venue up in Roseberry. During the summer, it is always, every weekend, someone is getting married in that barn. We have the old church in Roseberry. Everybody used to come to the old church and get married. Not anymore. It's the barn. Everybody loves the barn and they love to get married in it. So I'm hoping that when we get done with the Schick barn out there at Hidden Springs, that somebody's going to want to get married in it. And I perform weddings. So I'm hoping that I can do a wedding in the Schick barn.
I see that Mary says, I love barns because they are remnants from the past, and feeling what you do in a barn makes me feel a part of the past. I just love them and always feel someone who's whispering something from the past. I wish I knew more so I could hear the whispers. I guess that kind of goes with you too, Frank, right?
Yeah, if when you're in a barn, and she's got the spirit, when you're in the barn, you just listen to the barn. Listen to what it's telling you, because it's full of stories. I mean, this may sound crazy, but when you're trying to decipher how a barn was put together, how it was used, where the cows stood, where the horses were, sometimes some things are missing. You feel the barn. It's like it's being a part of history. It's stepping into history.
And I see that Alex has something to say here. It says, my cousins and I used to go up into the forbidden lofts and swing on a rope out through the barn window. We'd let go into a huge pile of hay below. Love the smell. I learned to milk cows, drive a tractor, and herd cattle with my uncle. I was a city girl, and these summertime memories run deep. I'm drawn to every barn I see out there.
All right.
And Brenda says,
Awesome.
you asked what it is about barns for me as a child. Some kids had security blankets. I had my old barn and animals. Wow, a lot of really cool stories. Now, Brenda is saying, excuse me, I already said that. Are there barns in Idaho that have been covered to homes for families? I'm not sure about the exact meaning of your question, but I have been in contact with a lady that's up in Bonner County, and she has a barn that she and her husband have turned into a home. I haven't been up there yet. It may or may not be in the hour-long show, but I've seen pictures of it, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And there are some all kinds of uses for barns. It's another thing that didn't make the show, but will probably be in the hour-long show, is there's a really cool antique store out in just outside of Idaho Falls, and they took a barn and from about a mile or two away, and they moved it and they mated it with a one-room schoolhouse, and it is now a really successful antique store. And upstairs is a really, really interesting apartment that these guys live in, and they've updated it and everything. It's really, really interesting. So I hope to include that in the hour-long show.
Forrest, if I can jump in here a second,
Yeah.
There is one up in Long Valley, Valley County, that people live in. They converted it into a house, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. And they live in the barn on a farm up there in They bought the barn part of it. They don't have, there's no house on that farm. They bought the barn, some land, and they made a house out of it.
Great. So Frank, tell me a little bit more about what other kinds of things have you done with Preservation Idaho, and how did the barn registry actually come about, and what are your long-term goals for that?
Well, we won't take credit for coming up with the idea. Washington State has a very, very good barn register program. And I was invited to come over there and speak at their conference a number of years ago, talking about the Roseberry barn that I spoke of. And I said, this is it. We got to have one of these, you know, and there's 2 or 3 of us from Preservation Idaho and from other historical organizations in Idaho. And so we all got together back in Idaho, and we used their form as a model, but we kind of used our own form, have come up with it. It's now on the website. But we felt that it was so important because, as Ken mentioned, they're so quickly disappearing that at least if we have them registered, and Preservation Idaho keeps that registry, so it's not, because this is a concern of people that it's going to go to some state group or whatever, or I mean some government group. And no, this is a nonprofit, is Preservation Idaho, that is keeping the records for the barns. And so just get on that website and look at it. It's fun to look at because there's quite a number of barns on it. But that's how it grew out of the Washington State program. And
Frank,
the long term, we're hoping that now in Washington, they've actually got a funded program where they do have an allocated number of dollars that will match people's grants or people's funds. We're hoping someday that Idaho can have the same kind of program. So if your barn is registered and we get that program, you're the first that's going to be able to access that program.
Wow, sounds like a great program. Frank, thank you very much for joining us. Dawn, the same. Thank you so much for being and agreeing to be on our panel this evening. Just wanted to remind everybody the broadcast premiere of Outdoor Idaho's Barns of Idaho will be this Thursday, October 15th at 9 p.m. And please spread the word. We'd love to have as many viewers, obviously, as we can get. If you enjoyed this screening, please consider making a donation to Idaho Public Television so that we can continue to deliver free quality programming and events to the community. Click on the donation button on the screen or go to idahoptv.org. We appreciate it. And you can register for other screening events that we do for Idaho Public Television at ovee.itvs.org. Once again, thank you very, very much. It's been great. Dawn, it was great meeting you. Frank, I'm sure we'll be in touch again on this project and potentially some others. I definitely want to know about the Long Valley family. So anyway, thank you guys very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Idaho Public Television, for this program. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And everybody, be safe and have a good evening.
All right. Good night.